Hello, I'm Tony Guida. This is My New York. My guest today grew up on Coney Island as a semi-juvenile delinquent. Those are his words. Fortunately for us, eventually he got serious. Ken Auletta, political reporter, author of a dozen books, and for the past 27 years, writer of the New Yorkers Annals of Communications column, Ken is America's premier media critic. And whoa boy, does our media need intelligent criticism. Ken has it next. Ken Auletta, how delightful to see you. Welcome.
Thanks, Tony.
What exactly is a semi-juvenile delinquent?
I was in my junior year of high school, Abraham Lincoln in Brooklyn. I was thrown out of high school for a couple of days. And I was thrown out because I copped a book of passes to escape to hang out at the sweet shop across the street. And my parents, the dean of men, Dean Orgel his name was, we called him Hitler, and he said, you're thrown out, you're suspended. So my parents got me in to see the principal. They didn't know him, but he was, Abe Lass was a very welcoming guy, open, very popular. And I went to his office, and he says, tell me Kenneth. He called me Kenneth.
Kenneth.
And Kenneth, like IT. And I'm bridling, you know, and I had my rolled up sleeves, and a cigarette pack probably in the corner. And stuff.
Pack of Luckies.
Yeah, right. And he said, tell me, Kenneth, what do you like about Abraham Lincoln High School? And I said, well, I like football and baseball. He said, well, tell me, Kenneth, how do you suppose you can play baseball and football for Abraham Lincoln High School if you don't attend Abraham Lincoln High School? And I went, duh. He had my attention.
Yeah.
And he was the mentor of my life. I mean,
And he apparently focused you, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, he made me read books, made me come to his office, no free periods, and read books, and he's great.
We are better for it that he focused.
I'm better for it too.
Let's talk about social media first, which to me is often antisocial when you think of what these Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, how they've balkanized our society. And it's ironic that platforms that were, I know that word, platform, that were designed to, I guess, bring people together, they do, but in a larger sense, they don't.
They bring like-minded people together, which is a problem, because if you are conservative or you're a liberal, you can seek out the views you agree with.
Right.
And that reinforces your views, and it tends to exclude other views from your view, A. And B, the second thing it does is that it aggregates news. So you don't read newspapers. You don't know you're getting news from the New York Times or the Daily News or the New York Post or something. You're just getting it in pieces. And you don't know the source. You don't know whether it's true, and a lot of false news gets in that way. But it also means that people are not reading newspapers or watching television and seeing a broad spectrum of not only ideas but subjects. It becomes balkanized, the word you used.
And what's scary about it to me, and there's a lot, I suppose, that's scary, but to me is the damage I perceive it's doing to us. And I guess most recently example, there were news accounts in December of two reports that the U.S. Senate had commissioned about the Russian campaign, influence campaign during the 2016 election. And though we already knew a fair amount about that by last December, this went into even greater detail. And before we might talk about that fine-grained detail, what I found startling is that both reports said this activity continues by the Russians, unabated, even now. How worried ought we be about that?
Very.
I mean, the 2020 election is going.
But you know, there's so many things to worry about. Russians and other nation states are, you know, seek to subvert us in different ways. By the way, we do some of that to others as well. But then you read reports about artificial intelligence and can actually create visions of people. Tony Guida saying some really extreme, ridiculous thing, and it looks like you and it speaks like you, but it's really not you. And they've done it with Obama and others. And that's a technique that people are, that will just be rife with the kind of falsehood that you worry about.
How far away is that from being perfect?
It's being done now. And you know, there's some Silicon Valley people who think this is kind of cool, that you could reanimate people's faces and put words in their mouth, and isn't this kind of cool? And it might be cool for a game, but in a democracy, if you have leaders saying something they don't actually believe in.
These reports, just to close the loop, also found that the Russian effort essentially, or especially, targeted African American voters, and its purpose overall was to keep down Democratic turnout, and I guess they succeeded to some extent or another.
Well, the argument is that Hillary didn't do as well in the black vote as Obama did, and therefore that was one of the contributing factors to her loss. Now, what role the Russian effort had?
I was just about to ask you, would Donald Trump have been elected without that effort?
I don't know the answer to that, and no one else.
I didn't expect you would, but
it's just conjecture.
Thought I'd ask.
But clearly, he was helped by it. He was helped by, presumably, Russia with WikiLeaks cooperation, putting out the Hillary emails, particularly putting out the emails on the day that it came out that Donald Trump had abused these women and paid to quiet them. That killed that story. And the Hillary story topped that, which was great for Donald Trump.
How much can we count on, or can we count at all, on Facebook, et cetera, to fix this stuff?
Listen, it's complicated. They say they want to fix it, but you know, it's you know, Facebook is a company that grew up with a belief that not in privacy. They believe that the world needs open information, and the more you can connect to people, and the more you know about each other, the better the world is. But they have so much data, and that data can be manipulated as the Russian hackers manipulate it, but as advertisers manipulate it. And you sell, and Facebook sells that data to advertisers and to better target who their potential customers might be. And one of the reasons there is an upswell of resentment and anger in governments all over the world, not just the US. In fact, we lag behind Western Europe in this, to say, hey, we have to do something to control this data. And the Davos meeting, which I read about, they were talking about this.
Yeah, 4 of the world leaders, including Germany, said we got to do something. We have to have some sort of regulations. But then I thought it interesting that Chancellor Merkel of Germany said, but we don't know how to write the rules.
Well, it's complicated, and you don't want to do it in a way that retards one of the great vibrant industries in the world, and companies in the world, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon. Amazon has even better information and data than Facebook does because they have what you purchase. Yeah. They're not guessing, they know what you've purchased. And you watch them now coming up like Silky Sullivan on the outside in terms of advertising dollars.
Right.
Advertisers increasingly are pouring money into Amazon because they say, hey, they got the golden data. And the question then becomes, for instance, they say, Ken, the ability to target is so great. I wrote a book about advertising recently.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did, they would say,
June.
Yeah, they would say that, you know, if we have data on you, Ken, and we have your GPS, we know you are where you are with your mobile phone. We can follow you. We know you're on 34th Street, right? And we know you're not far from Macy's, right? And we know you bought a sport jacket in Macy's. If you walk into Macy's now, Ken, we'll give you 20% off on another sport jacket. Now, how is Ken going to respond to that? Is Ken going to say, wow, this is great, 20% off? Or is Ken going to say, how the hell do you know so much about me? Yeah. And I suspect more people than you would expect will say, how the hell do you know so much about me? And that's the privacy issue.
And they've been giving, we have been giving it away all this time, not apparently realizing how much we're giving away. It seemed to me that in his testimony and in the testimony of other lieutenants, Mark Zuckerberg didn't inspire a lot of confidence in Washington in terms of wanting to aggressively get after this, because, I mean, Zuckerberg has said Facebook is we're a tech industry. We're not a media industry.
But they are a media industry.
Yeah.
If people are getting their information from it, they're a media industry. And A. B, it is really expensive to try and fix it. And you're not going to have perfection. You're not going to perfectly fix it. So he knows it's very expensive, and he can't just rely on his machines. He's an engineer type person who, like many people in the Valley, grew up believing that machines and algorithms and data are the answer. It's a science. Well, it's not a science. And they're human beings. And what has he done in the last year? He's hired roughly 20,000 what he calls curators. You and I would call editors, that basically try and sort out fake news and real news and try and alert people. But that's very expensive, and it takes away from his profit margins. And no CEO likes that.
Yeah.
It's part of the problem.
How much of that do you think, I read a piece in Rolling Stone long ago, how much of that do you think is the 20,000 editors, or whatever you want to call them, consultants, at least seem to be a predominance from, quote unquote, the establishment, and there's a threat in what they're doing to independent media blogs and stuff on Facebook. And the little guys really, if you're going to be a successful little blogger, you need Facebook and those other platforms. You
need advertising. And because that's what funds, there's a limit to how many people can afford subscriptions. So increasingly the digital upstarts, be it bloggers or podcasts or online newspapers like BuzzFeed or Vice or magazines, publications, TV, they need advertising. And when you look at what's happening to digital ads, all that money is being shoveled to 3 companies, Facebook, Google, and Amazon. And BuzzFeed just laid off 15% of its staff last week. Vice has laid off people. Huffington Post has laid off people. Right. So even the people who are going to disrupt traditional newspapers, the Vices, the BuzzFeeds world, they're now being disrupted. And they're being disrupted by who? Facebook, Google, and
What you said about Zuckerberg a moment ago made me think of a book you wrote 8 or 9 years ago about Google, in which you pointed out that here's another company that starts out with these noble ideas. I mean, their motto is what? Don't be evil. Don't be evil. Google, don't be evil. Facebook, we're going to bring people together. All this good stuff. But in the book you pointed out, how does Google exist? The business plan is they steal or they copy everything from the internet, whether they have the right to or not, and then they sell it.
And they don't pay.
They pay nothing.
Compensation.
Yeah, they don't pay.
And increasingly, there's an upswell of people. Rupert Murdoch has made this argument increasingly, as have others, that the Googles and the Facebook, which are benefiting from the data and the content we create, they should do what the cable industry has been compelled to do by the Congress, which is if you're CBS or ABC or Fox or NBC, they have to pay you something called retransmission consent. Right. Billions of dollars a year they pay to television broadcasters in order to show on cable their programs, and that they're compensating them for it. So the argument becomes, should Google and Facebook and Apple not compensate content companies for newspapers, et cetera? And that is an argument I think that will swell in coming years. In terms of privacy, in terms of data, the European model is I, as a user, have to opt in. Right. Here, in our country, you have to opt out. You have to opt out. The presumption is I'm going to give them the right to take this unless I tell them no. It's the opposite in Europe. Do you think that could work here? I think there will be a clamor for that here, as there was in Western Europe. It's not uncomplicated. It's very expensive for digital companies to pay to change the system. The Googles and the Facebook have a lot of money. They could do it. The smaller guys, who are supposedly the entrepreneurs, the guys breaking through, have a harder time affording that and dealing with the amount of paperwork. I remember I covered the Microsoft trial. I actually wrote a book about it.
You've written a book about everything.
I feel like that. But in 2000, and what happened there is that the judge ruled that Microsoft was a monopoly and they should be broken up, which is what the Justice Department and the Clinton administration wanted. And I thought that was just a crazy idea to break up Microsoft, because if you looked at what was happening with the internet, open source software, et cetera, they were going to be broken up by the internet, by events that were taking place. And that's what happened. Microsoft lost its monopoly power because of the natural force of competitive forces that was in play. And you didn't need a government bureaucracy to come in. Then you say, well, are there not things the government could do? Of course there are. I mean, for instance, privacy is one. How do you impose more regulations on what data you can collect on me and use that data? Secondly, for instance, Facebook went out and bought two companies that could have wound up being real competitive threats to them. Start with Instagram, right? Mm-hmm. Instagram it's growing much faster than Facebook is right now. And they saw very smartly that this was a potential competitive threat. The government could impose rules saying, hey, you can't buy potential competitors. And you have to adjudicate that and make a judgment whether that's, you know, some people want to be bought and it won't do any harm if they are bought, smaller companies. But Instagram is a perfect candidate to say, hey, put the stop sign, let's take a look at this. Should they be allowed to buy Instagram? Of course, Instagram could have provided the competition they need.
Sure. Let's go to more traditional journalism. At a speech you gave not long ago, I was there, you talked about, use this word clickbait, which my audience might not understand, but you talked about your concerns for journalism, one of which is that Donald Trump, in your view, is clickbait for journalists. What do you mean by that?
I mean that we give much too much attention to Donald Trump. I think if you look at television, take CNN or MSNBC, it's the old Trump network. I mean, from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until through prime time, 11 o'clock at night, it's almost all Trump. CNN, which has the largest worldwide news gathering operation, if you watch CNN between those hours, there's very little world news you're going to get. You get people sitting in a studio looking at their navel and talking about Donald Trump. Now, if you watch Fox, you get the opposite. They talk about Donald Trump, but it's like state television. I mean, isn't he wonderful?
Yeah,
and
adoration.
Yeah, and so that's more infuriating. But it really infuriates me as well that I think the press, particularly television, but also the New York Times and the Washington Post, there are too many stories about Donald Trump. And that's not to say that there aren't great investigative reports that those papers have done about Donald Trump and his taxes or how he has a fake foundation.
Pointing that out, how did that land like a thud? I mean, the Times, you talk about investigative. Times did this long, deeply researched and reported piece about his taxes and where he got his money from and how his whole origin story is nonsense. His father gave it all to him. You know, he didn't build anything. And his dad. Now this story, I mean, they worked on it who knows how long, and I haven't heard a peep about that since.
It's actually mystifying, but it maybe this is what I really fear, that when you look at the poll numbers of how the press is viewed, we're viewed only a little better than the members of Congress.
Yeah,
we have very high negatives, and roughly 50% of the public doesn't trust news. Is that an example of where we fell into this trap where the Times does this brilliant reporting that should win every award out there, but much of the public doesn't believe it because they think they agree with Donald Trump?
Well, you said a chilling thing at that same dinner, that the public doesn't believe journalism's facts. Facts. Right. Not opinion, facts. The earth is round. No, it's not. It's flat. I mean,
how about climate change? Trump doesn't believe it. You know, Most of the facts say it's true. There really is a danger.
But
the climate
that's scary. I mean, what you're talking about here is, yeah, the low standing that journalism has among the public, but not to believe in facts, to choose, the sun rises in the east. No, it doesn't, it rises in the west.
Yeah, Our senator from New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, once said that you're entitled to your own opinions. You're not entitled to your own facts. But in fact, people, and it goes back to what you started this interview with, Tony, people snatch from Facebook or Google, they latch on to the opinions and ideas and beliefs that they want to have.
That they like, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's happening. So people, no longer do people say, well, I will read the New York Times and I will find out the facts, or I'll watch Walter Cronkite and I'll find out the facts. That doesn't exist anymore. The blizzard of choices we have is wonderful in a democracy, but it's also a burden and a curse.
So what saves us? How much in need of saving are we? and who's the savior, or what's the savior?
I don't know, but let's stay with your journalism question. We are supposed to be, in my judgment, the referee. We're not participating in the game. And a referee should be respected. Now, the referee who blew the call in the New Orleans game
should not be
respected. And by the way, it has a cascades on all referees and lowers their trust factor. But I think if we have to regain our trust, and one of the ways we regain our trust is to attempt to be the referee. And that doesn't mean we don't have opinions. It doesn't mean we don't call out Donald Trump's lies or falsehoods.
Well, I think you're talking about having editors, whether they be on television or news directors or bosses, or in journalism, in traditional journalism, having enough backbone to stand up and say, this is important, and we're going to tell our viewers or our readers, and that's not so important, and we're going to leave, even though everybody else is chasing that. And that happened in my world, local news, also, when they started focus groups.
But it means that the people who sign the checks for the journalists, for the editors, be they the people on television or be they the people in newspapers and magazines, have to join in that and have to be willing to say, I know we get better ratings with Donald Trump, and I know our digital subscribers go up the more we write about Donald Trump.
It's red meat. It's going to be red meat.
But we're not in the clickbait business. We're not in the red meat business.
Yeah.
And that's tough to do.
Well, it's like the argument some of us were making back then, because the focus groups were telling the bosses what the public wanted to see, and so we were supposed to give it to them. And some of us would argue, no, that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do exactly as you say. Differentiate between what's important and what isn't important, because we presumably know, and put it out there.
I mean, the whole idea of a front page or the lead in a newscast is that an editor has decided that this is what we think is most important for you as a citizen to know happened today.
Right.
This is really news.
Yeah.
And Kim Kardashian doesn't qualify as that.
Never. But never. In my journalism empire, never. Speaking of what qualifies and what doesn't, I mentioned at the top, Ken's written 12 books. He's deep into his 13th, a biography of Harvey Weinstein. Is there some headline you want to share with us? I don't want you to blow your sails when the book comes out, but maybe it could be a teaser. No. Okay. Never ask a journalist who hasn't finished a book to divulge something.
You're good.
Have you learned things that surprised even you?
Well, you always do.
Yeah.
In journalism, you learn things, whether you're working on a book about Harvey Weinstein or anyone else. I mean, if you listen, which is what we're supposed to do as journalists, you always are surprised and you're always amazed. And it's and you get excited that, oh my God, this is a new person I haven't talked to, and I think they may know some secrets that I really need to know, or have an understanding or perception that I really need to have shared with me. And you get all excited about that. And sometimes you strike gold, and sometimes it's a waste of time.
Can you see the finish line with the Weinstein book? No?
I've got a long runway. I've got a lot to do.
Good thing you have a contract with the New Yorker. which reminds me of a whole interesting question and answer session you had with one of the Google founders in that Google book. I don't think we have time for it here, but you really pinned him down to, I don't know if you even remember this, but you know, he's talking about you writing a book, Ken, what's the point? You know, just put it on the internet. And you pointed out to him the necessity of a publisher, the necessity, you know, to pay for the advance, to pay for you to make the trips, to do and finish it quickly if you can.
No, I said, you know, this is how I make my living. And they wanted to show me their digital books, and I go downstairs and I look at their operation digital books, and they thought it'd be cool to show them how they've digitized one of my books without my permission. So they show me this book, and here you can go anywhere in your book, you can read anything you want in Ken Auletta's book here. Isn't that wonderful, Ken Auletta? And I'm sitting there, I said, that's interesting. I didn't say anything. As soon as I got out of that room, I called my publisher and said, what the hell is going on here? You know, because what I tried to say to the Google guys, I said, because they were pressed me on, I said, that's how I make my living. That's how I support for coming out here. That's how I pay for when I take you guys to a meal, I have to pay for it, and that's part of my expense from the publisher.
Right.
So you're taking away my livelihood if you put everything for free out there.
Exactly. Well, it won't be free, but it'll be worth reading when it comes out. Ken's newest book on Weinstein, and we look forward to that. Look forward to having you back then when it comes out.
Pleasure, Tony. Good to see you.
You too, Ken. Thank you. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.